Welcome back, you guys. This is the Art School Graduate Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Robinson, and today I'm talking with a talented designer, educator, and we were just talking about he owns his own studio in Austin, Texas. We are speaking with Russell today. Russell, thank you for joining me on my podcast today, sir.
Thank you, Justin. Thanks for having me.
I know we first jumped off talking about the fun and excitement of owning a design studio, but let's talk about how you discovered design. And I believe you said you discovered it a little later in life. It wasn't kind of like a big jump from high school through graduate school and all that. So would you share that story for us?
Yeah. So, and it sounds really pathetic, to be honest with you. When I look back, I'm like, God, it sounds so sad. But like growing up in the 80s, the only thing that was designer and that I knew about were fragrances and jeans. That was it, for real. So, no one ever explained to me that the things like that bad poster in the library or these books or something that I saw, no one ever told me that there was a designer behind that. I didn't know that there were people whose jobs were to be a designer or create layouts and print and things like that. No one, and it sounds sad, but it's like I never made that connection. I knew that you could draw. I knew that you could paint. I knew that you could, make music and do those things. But no one ever said like, hey, somebody had to like organize this hierarchy and make sure you read that. So it didn't come to me until I was well into being an adult that I realized, that could happen.
With that hitting you, what was it? Was there like a singular thing, or was it you just kind of leaning more into like the artistic side of design?
Well, I aspired long time ago, to be in film. And again, you saw people make movies and you thought, I want to do that. Never knowing anybody who ever made movies or anything of the sort. It was just like blind aspiration with no education. So, but what it was I had aspirations to do movies, and then I needed money. I was a new father. I needed money, and I had these aspirations, but the reality is that I had no education. So I just started editing people's home videos. Right, really weird. Right, taking someone's VHS tape, whatever little, digital 8 tape, and cutting out all the BS and just getting to the nuggets and then creating kind of like a highlights reel or whatever for people of like their kids growing up and things like that. I started doing that. Well, then I had to do on-screen titles, right? And you do that with like iMovie and stuff like that. Yeah. And then I started, I'm burning it to a DVD. So I need to like create a little DVD sleeve and all that. So it was the worst stuff ever, but it was my hustle. It's how I was paying the bills. And I started getting into that more and more and more. And then my brother actually graduated from ACC with a degree in design. And I still didn't know what it was, but it was like that introduction. So as soon as I started getting interested, he gave me a bootleg copy of CS2, Illustrator only. All I had was Illustrator. So I was just straight working in Vector. And that was really how I got started in design and realizing, okay, that's what I'm doing is I'm laying out business cards, I'm laying out things and I'm designing, right? Still never had ever met a designer, right?
Yeah.
It really, I was just faking it and figuring out in the worst ways possible how to make things, appear from my head to the screen and then on paper.
Yeah. Don't feel bad. Many a designer, many a people I've talked to, even myself, everybody has started with the bootleg version of Adobe.
Oh, I don't feel bad at all. No, that's all I had.
My first copy came from Craigslist. I kid you not, I met them at a KFC, brought my laptop, they downloaded it, dude, off of KFC's Wi-Fi. Put the codes in, boom. All I had was Illustrator and Photoshop though, so it worked though. That was back.
No, I remember when you got it. You got it. You had to make sure that when you entered it, you had to make sure you didn't have any internet connection, so that way it didn't connect. So back then, you just had like a hard code that you would get from somebody, And then
Mhm.
it's like, don't connect to the internet when you're doing this, right? Because they're gonna find out. So
Yeah, man.
yeah, I
Oh.
rolled like that for a long time.
Oh, man. So, that's interesting. So your brother went and got the degree. So was he giving you free game, or was it more of, like, curiosity for you?
It was more of a curiosity thing. For
Mhm,
him, he had a political science major,
mhm,
I believe, and graphic design. And
mhm.
really, he had been we grew up as like just kids of the '80s drawing and stuff and doing things.
Mm,
He was way more like fine art
mm,
skills
mhm,
better than me. I was more the idea kid, the problem solver,
mhm,
which I didn't realize until becoming an adult and realizing what design is. I didn't
right.
realize I had been a designer since I was like 6.
Mm,
I just didn't realize that because I didn't realize
right.
problem solving was what makes a designer. And
Yeah.
so for him, he always had the fine art skills, and I admired that. We were creative kids, but his interest in design was really more of a spark. I didn't
Mhm,
see a lot of the work that he did. He didn't do a lot of design work. He found himself in creative roles, but more of like creative leadership in a
mm,
sense of
yeah.
like programming and
Mhm,
campaigns and things like that. And that's kind of where his government degree came from. And now he works in the kind of nonprofit sector out
mhm,
in LA. And a lot of his education in design is more kind of leading the creative to support a campaign, but he's at a
got
level
it.
where they're talking about how to reach people and who to reach and numbers and things like that. He's no longer moving pixels. It's been a
Mm,
couple of decades since he's moved any pixels, so we don't see
mm.
each other as competition in that way at all. But I'm inspired by the work he does, and vice versa.
Oh, man, that's an amazing story. So what was your "I'm a designer now"? Like, what was that moment when you were just like, "Oh, I'm here. I'm here and I'm ready for it?"
Man, man, there's so many things. Like
Mhm,
I tend to kind of downplay my successes
mhm,
because yeah, I think it's just a natural instinct for like
mhm,
a hustler or somebody who's like, yeah, I'm here, but that's it. Like I still I still have a ways to go up, and so you
mhm,
just kind of downplay any successes. But I think about like moments where you know I did you know I went to a job and I've actually told somebody the story today. My students the story today. I think it was after I graduated high school. I mean, sorry, college. I think it was
mhm,
after college that I actually had that like moment of I'm a designer. I think I was always kind of imposter syndrome. Like I was always kind of just
mm,
convincing myself
yeah.
and surprised I convinced anybody else to pay me money. But I think it was that moment that I
Mhm,
really believed I was a designer when I
mhm.
went on my first like job interview.
That's dope.
And it was for a talent agency, like
Mhm,
Aquint. And I submitted my portfolio online. They had me come in the next day,
mhm,
and like I felt like, okay, this is it. And then I went on an interview at a big agency, and that was that moment where I walked
mhm,
into my very first agency. I'd never went on any studio tours or anything of the sort, and I
mhm.
was just like, wow, like I'm amongst these people. I didn't get the job, but I've ended up becoming really good friends with the creative director who's now the owner
Oh,
of that
that's dope.
agency. And that was 15 years ago, and
Mhm,
we still kind of see each other as like colleagues and like are inspired by each other. And but 15 years ago, I was just like happy to walk through his door, hoping to get me some income coming in. And
yeah.
yeah, so I think that was like that moment where I like this is who I am. But all the times before, I mean, I freelanced for about 6 years before going to school. I didn't go to
Mhm,
college until I was 27 years old.
mm,
And so all those times I felt like I was just kind of telling myself and the world and convincing the world that I was something at the same
mhm,
time trying to convince myself.
So being that you were in Austin, it's not known for being a major
No.
design hub at
Mm-mm.
all. Like, I hear about LA, I hear about New York, of course, and then it kinda just jumps overseas to then. So, were there any, or maybe were there a few design role models, or did you have to kind of find your way through design during that time?
So no, I mean exactly right. Like that's the kind of thing is it's sad to believe that where you are located at
Mhm,
determines opportunities, but it's true, right? And
mhm,
people gravitate to hubs so that way they can be around that synergy, you know, back
Mhm.
in I guess 60s, you know, poets in New York and whatnot.
Yeah.
And you know, people found their tribe and they migrated to those areas to be in those spaces. You know, I
Mhm.
grew up in Austin. My family's from Texas, and my larger family is from Austin. And I got, you know, married my high school sweetheart, did all the
Mhm.
things, you know, but
Yeah.
I set hooks so that I had to stay here. And so
Mhm.
the possibility, I had never seen anybody leave either, right? So I never knew. My brother was the only one who had
Mhm.
left, but he didn't leave until, you know, like 20, I was 23. So
Mhm.
real reality was I didn't know what was possible, right? It
Right.
sounds really like, man, like where was this guy? But you have to understand, like, I was a full adult by the time the internet became like, you know,
Popping.
public,
Yeah.
you know. So for me, it wasn't like I just didn't know. I didn't have
Mhm.
access to this stuff. So like I said, I didn't know anything about design. I didn't know any
Mhm.
designers. So it wasn't until I had claimed to be a designer, had worked freelance, needed money, decided I was going to go to school to get grants and loans. And
Mhm.
it was in school that I actually met other designers. And
Mm.
those were my instructors. And my first like design hero was my mentor, Owen Hammonds, who is still my mentor. Uh, uh, he's been so instrumental in just my trajectory in
Mhm.
design. And you know, he was the
That's
first
dope.
person that kind of showed me. He was the first black man who was designing that showed me like, hey, this is something you can do and have a
Mhm.
successful career at.
Yeah.
And it's funny because he's never freelance. He's never owned his own studio. He's never done anything. And he like sees me. He's like, dude, there's not a person that will out hustle Russell ever. And it's like, you know, but he sees that in me. And at the same time,
Mhm.
I see this like this he's like the Yoda of design, right? Like
Right.
he is so precise in what he does
Yeah.
that I've just always been in awe of him. And to
Mm.
think that together we have been on stages together, we have served on the AIGA board together, we have done so many things together, and yet I still see him as like this example of
Mhm.
success that I aspire to be at.
That I think every designer needs to have, like, their Yoda. It will kind of
Absolutely.
I believe it will possibly make this journey as, I would say, smooth as possible, as smooth as it can be, because we know as designers when it comes to, either, like, critiques or even reviews or even you working in the business, how difficult it can be with clientele, projects, equipment, technology. So having that one person you can go, "Hey, I'm having a shit day right now in design." And then they can speak life to you because they've been there. I think we all need that Yoda in our life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Owen was instrumental. So, you know, as soon as I graduated college, I was fortunate enough to
Mhm.
find myself shortly after graduation working for Dell as a designer and then on the brand team. And I didn't know what that was like. I had never worked in any sort of capacity with a
Mhm.
design team. The most I had done is like worked at the college newspaper and laid out
Mhm.
magazine ads and layouts and stuff. That was the most teamwork I had done. So here I am at a Fortune 50 company,
Mhm.
and it's not the work that's new to me. It's the navigating that type of
Mm.
space. It's the
Yeah.
politics. It's that, and immediately that's where I saw the value of having somebody like Owen in my corner, because he was able to help me just understand what was really being said through the lens of HR and through the
Mhm.
lens of you know, political correctness and all that, and help me just navigate that space
Mm.
that otherwise I just wasn't familiar with. You know, I
Mhm.
didn't have access to professional environments prior to, you know, this. I was just,
Mhm.
you know, a garden variety hustler who was just getting through. and
Yeah.
and you know, I have the gift of gab, and you
Mhm.
know, and people trusted me for some reason. I have no idea why. And I had some decent work, but I had good storytelling, and that's
Mm.
really what people gravitated to, was like, this guy can tell a good story and has
Mm.
a concept and a why behind his work. But that only got me so far. It was the rest of the stuff, like, how do I just navigate this space? And
Right.
Owen helped me tremendously with that.
Mm. That's amazing. So, how did you build your confidence within this space? Because as you know, you see work as designers, we see work coming from everywhere. And we're like, damn, that's pretty good. Damn, that's actually pretty good too. So, how did you, in this space where you're now at this Fortune 50 company. You're learning these different things. So how did you build that confidence as a designer to just step out and just be bold with it?
Confidence is a weird thing. It really is because, you know, we're taught for the most part, like people try to tell us to be humble, right?
Mhm.
Especially brown and black people. They try to tell us to be humble. And I was brought up, my father gave us a ton of false confidence.
Mhm.
And I say this is like, he would tell us, like, nobody fucks with the Toynes. Like when you're
Mhm.
a kid, you believe that shit. Like you were like,
Yeah,
yeah. But
yeah.
then you grow up and you realize, like, I can't solve all my problems with violence, right? Like I can't do this. And you don't know what that means when you're a
Yeah.
kid, when you solved all your problems with violence and you
Mhm.
you you gave this like you radiated confidence because it was armor. It was armor
Yeah.
because you had to be in a gauntlet every day at school or in the
Mhm.
neighborhood. You had to act like you're going to beat somebody's ass, even though you were just hoping that they weren't going to ever test that, right? So you do that enough of your life,
Mhm.
you continue that behavior. And
Mhm.
it wasn't until I was about 21 where I told myself to shut up because I was talking a lot, but I wasn't really being about it. And so that's when
Mhm.
I was like, look, Russell, you say you're going to do a lot. Shut up and start doing stuff. And so
Mhm.
that's when I just told myself, like, you don't have to tell everybody what you're doing. Just
Right.
show them.
Mhm.
And by doing it over and over again, I realized, you know, it I wish I had a style. I wish that
Mhm.
I had like a thing that you can go, oh, that's a Russell Toynes piece. I wish that there was something. I've never had a style. I've always been a kind of an enigma in a sense of design where I can be a very adaptive. When I realized that it wasn't that I didn't have a style, or it
Mhm.
wasn't that I didn't have a look. It was that what I was really, really, really good at wasn't about making pictures that people liked.
Mhm.
It was about solving problems, and I learned to solve so many different problems that that's what I'm really, really good at. And
Yeah.
so that was where I realized, holy crap, like I'm good at people, right? I'm
Yeah.
good at helping people think or understanding how people think,
Mhm.
and then applying that in the most simplest way. I've
Yes.
always had a little bit, not a
Mhm.
lot. So I've had to say, I tell people I had to make chicken salad out of chicken shit. And so it's like I realized that as a business owner, if you come to me, you have a lot of things on your plate. You
Right.
don't have time to manage me. You don't have time to go through a multi-page brief and
Mhm.
all that, right? You
Yep.
need someone who's going to walk you through that process and make it as easy as possible and not put barriers up. Where I know a
Mhm.
lot of designers, they kind of act like they're up here, and that's like, well, if you don't have time to do this, if they got time to write a check, I've got time, right? So let's talk about it because people will come up with more money than they can come up with more time. And so that's what I
Okay.
realized. I was really, really good at understanding people.
Mhm.
And therefore, no matter what design I did, no matter what the challenge was, the first thing I had to do was connect with them. And
Mhm.
then that's something that I realized that has set me apart from all of my design
Mhm.
colleagues is that, I really, really understand what it is to be a person in this
That's
space.
dope. That's dope. Now let me ask you this. Now, are all good checks or is all good money, if you know what I
No,
mean?
no, man. I have taken work that I later on regretted. I have given myself so many life lessons. Absolutely not. So part of our so when leaving Dell and starting Studios though,
Mhm.
I knew that I had to have a kind of a guide, a litmus
Mhm.
test of what was I going to do and what was I not
Yeah.
going to do. And that's
Yeah.
something that I tell a lot of my clients too when I was freelancing and even now when we're doing branding and everything, a lot of times people might say, well, I know it when I see it, right? And
Right.
that's a big red flag. And so as I'm talking with people, if they can't tell me what they do want, tell me what you don't want. And that's
Mhm.
usually where I start to figure out who they are. And people are really passionate about what they don't want
Right.
in their life. And so
Right.
I knew that in starting Studios, though, what I didn't want was just to say yes to anything and be the Walmart of design or the bottom of the barrel
Mhm.
when it comes to the work that we do. And so we have a motto that says, do good work for good people with good people. That's it. Pretty
Yeah.
simple. It doesn't matter if it's a sign, it doesn't matter if it's a logo, it doesn't matter if it's a campaign, it doesn't matter if it's a sticker pack, it doesn't matter if it's a $100 project or a
Mhm.
$100,000 project.
Yeah.
Is it good work,
Yeah.
right? And is that
Yeah.
person good? And I have
Mhm.
turned down lots of work for people that are not good people, and
Mhm.
I've turned down lots of work for good people that are not good work. And I'm not talking about like good for me, but that
Yeah.
it's not solving their problem. They want me to
Right.
do something, and I'm like, that's not going to solve the problem. I'm just going to take your money.
Right.
And then also our team, everybody that works for us has to be a good person. Like,
Mhm.
just that's it, I mean, and so, we don't operate like a lot of businesses where it's like money first. It's,
Mhm.
money is not going to solve your problems.
Right.
It eventually becomes a bigger problem in itself.
Mhm.
And, the pandemic tested that for a lot of us. A lot of
Right.
people immediately started grabbing their pearls and clutching their purses when it came to like, oh my gosh, I got to let go of my team. I got
Mhm.
to, free up some cash and all that. And we knew that this was going to be a short time.
Mhm.
It ended up being way longer than we thought. But we knew that as soon as we let go of somebody, that would create the atmosphere of you know scarcity, and that
Panic.
we would have
Yeah.
our team feeling like at any moment we were gonna let more people go. And so we held on. We even gave people raises during the pandemic. We did everything
Man.
we could because we knew that we were going to bounce back in
Man.
2023, 2024. Awesome
Crushed
years
it.
for us.
That's amazing. I think if you do right by people, your blessings do come. I feel like that
Absolutely. I've had
100%.
so many people give so much to me and support me, and so I do as much as I can to give back.
So now that we're in your design practice and your studio life, what does a day at Studio Zoe look like for you?
So unfortunately, I tell my students, the higher up you go, the further away from the work you get.
Mhm.
And so, I wanted to be a designer. I became a
Mhm.
designer at Dell. I wanted to be a senior designer. And I wanted to help lead and like have somebody underneath me. And then I became an art director, then became a senior art director, and then I
Yeah.
became like what was a pseudo associate creative director. And the further up you go, the less in the programs you are, and the more
Yeah.
in email
Meetings.
that you
Yeah.
live in, and just process and policy.
Yep.
And so for me, as a co-owner at Studio Zoe and also a creative director, the majority of my time unfortunately is spent
Mhm.
in emails and writing contracts and
Yeah.
reviewing work.
Mhm.
We're a fully remote team since the pandemic. That actually was a blessing in disguise. So we're a fully remote team. So a lot of what I'm doing is a lot what we're doing as
Mhm.
I'm meeting with my team, and we're all local and to the Austin,
Okay.
Central Texas area, but we only see each other maybe once a month.
Mhm.
So in person.
Mhm.
And so a lot of it is like, reviewing, decks, and
Mhm.
then, having them open up their file, and we just kind of, over the shoulder art direct sometimes just on camera. I'm like, okay, let's move this, let's do this,
Yeah.
and so sometimes it's like that. But a lot of it is
That's
writing.
cool.
I write
Mm.
a lot, whether it be articles, presentations, emails, contracts. I do a lot of writing.
Okay. In that process of being higher up, do you miss the
Oh,
actual
yes.
working? You
Oh,
miss it? Oh,
I miss it so much, man. Like, you don't even know, like, the joy I get when I get to steal a project back, right? The joy
Yeah.
I get. There's projects that come that I just don't even share with the team, right? And the only time I share it with them is when I need exports,
Mm.
right? So
That's
I'll
funny.
do all the work, and I'm like, export all the files, rename them, change the colors, do these things. But like, I've done all the meat of it. Now it's time
Uh-huh.
for you to take it. Like, I'll give it to the production designer. I'm like, okay, you take it, just do all the exports and get it all packaged up. But absolutely, like, I miss the ideation. I miss
Mhm.
the journey. I miss the noodling because unfortunately, when you're in this role,
Mhm.
you think like, I'm paying somebody a
Mhm.
salary to
To do
do
this.
what I'm doing.
Mhm.
Why am I doing it? Right? That's not the best bang for the buck. Get it in, either give them the brief,
Mhm.
get it in a good spot, hand it to them and tell them to roll with it,
Yeah.
because there are other things. Your job is to bring the money in, your job is to elevate the creative. Your job is
Mhm.
not to do the work. And that's
Right.
so hard because I have to remind myself
Yeah.
that regularly. And then, my wife sometimes, who's the other partner, she's a controller and HR and account manager.
Mhm.
she would sometimes see me working on something. She's like, "You don't need to be doing that." And I'm just like, "But
Mm.
I want to."
Oh man, that's incredible. So we take in this journey and now you have your studio. You are big dog in charge. You've taken it from a local place to this global presence. What were some key moves that made this leap possible?
I think, well, I think it's natural for people to feel that you need to have the brick and mortar, right?
Mhm.
You have to have the glitz and the glam to actually bring clients in to get them to pay those 5 and 6 figure prices, so that
Mhm.
way you can keep the doors open and pay people salaries. And I've had a lot
Mhm.
of people come to me and were like, how did you get your first employee, and like, how did you make that leap of faith and all
Mhm.
that? And I knew from the get-go that I couldn't do the work, right? I could not work on the business and in the business at the same time.
Right.
So I knew I had to have a team. And so we started out with a small team, and then as the work got, more and more, we got more people, and we were still very local, right? We A lot of the work that we were doing was Austin. Sometimes people would be like, "Hey, do you do stuff outside of Austin?" We were like, "Oh yeah, we do work all over." Do you do work
Mhm.
sometimes outside of Texas? We had like a national account where we were doing, various projects in Boston or Chicago. And,
Uh-huh.
these were uh, interior design agencies, which are great because
Mhm.
they have clients all over. And when
Yeah.
they find like a trusted source, they will go to you over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So, and then there's a lot of turnover in the
Mhm.
industry also. So, an interior design agency, they'll have 7, 8 people. And then, next year, 3 of them have gone to another agency. Well, that's 3 more agencies that you
Yeah.
got that you didn't have the year before. And it just, it's like pollinating. And so, really, that's kind of how we started doing more and more work outside of Austin. But it was a pandemic. It was a pandemic that changed everything, because our focus, was Austin and feeling like we had to make a physical presence at every single
Mhm.
project. And then the pandemic forced us to be inside, and we started working more remote,
Mhm.
and no one said boo about it. And then all of a sudden, we were like getting asked to do projects outside of, Texas,
Mhm.
outside of, our this, the West and the Southwest. And then we were doing projects in Singapore, we were doing projects in Canada, we were doing
Wow.
projects in other places, the Bahamas and whatnot. And so it was just like, okay, like, people understand, like, we can do this work that we do, doing wayfinding, signage,
Mhm.
branding, doing all of that. And then we have connections all over the world to get them fabricated and sent and installed. And we can coordinate with your GC, and we coordinate, like, we have all this. People are like, I don't care how you do it, just do it. And we were
Yeah.
doing it. And so
Wow.
that's really how it went. So now, like, our whole mindset has never been on borders. I mean, it's never been on like, oh, what we can and can't do. Taxes are a whole different thing. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
When you start doing taxes, we start doing work in other states, y'all. Like, taxes become a big, big issue. Even if it's just
Mhm.
design work, it doesn't have to be tangible work. All of a sudden, you
Yep.
got Nexus presence in a certain state, and you got to file taxes with that state, and that becomes a
Mhm.
nightmare after a
Oh
while.
my goodness. I can imagine. I can imagine that. So with these new clients and the new reach you have, how was it working with these seems like bigger and bigger and bigger brands? How was that working for them or working with them?
I've always, you know, it's weird. I've never really been one to be intimidated by large companies. And the reason why I say that is, when you work for like a company like Dell and you realize,
Mhm.
okay, it's just a bunch of people, individuals, and it's nothing special, right? There's nobody who's like a wizard. There's nobody who's a genius. Like, they're just all
Yeah.
people scrambling, trying to get something done.
Yeah.
Timelines are hectic. Budgets are always changing. Like, it's just the same craziness you see in like a small business is the same for a big Fortune 50 company. So
Mhm.
I just realized that, like, at the end of the day, I'm working with a person. And if
Mhm.
I can make
Yeah.
that person feel like I hear them, and I'm here to support them, and
Mhm.
I value their opinion, but also I'm an expert in what I'm
Mhm.
doing. That's when, you make connections with people, and they're just like, damn, they're just regular ass people. Like, they get me,
Mhm.
they solve my problems. And like, as soon as they realize like you are there and you can speak on their level, and you're not talking
Yeah.
above them or below them, and you're not trying to, be intimidating, or,
Mhm.
and I've seen a lot of agencies that I'm super impressed with that kind of give that, you know, energy and that era, that vibe of like, we're superior,
Mhm.
and I'm just a regular old person, right? I speak like a regular old person. I don't try to act like I'm special, but at the same time, like we're really good at what we do,
Mhm.
and we know that. But at the same time, if you tell me like, hey, I got a budget of X, and I'll tell you right away that we're not speaking the same language, or we can make that work. But I think really, as we've worked with bigger brands and larger projects, in the several six figures, you start to realize, man, like it's the same old stuff. It's just how much more work, right?
Right.
And so I kind of don't get intimidated by that stuff anymore. And it
Mm.
seems weird, but when you realize it's just people,
Yeah.
then you don't have to be intimidated anymore. It's like, okay, I know what I need to do. I'm
Mhm.
good at what I do. Just do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it, and it'll
Yeah.
all be all right.
Yeah. So do you ever I know you said let me ask you this. What are your top 3 major client red flags?
Okay. Top three major client red flags. All right.
Yeah.
One is somebody who, as soon as you start talking about money,
They start
they
fidgeting.
they start fidgeting, right? It's like, oh, I don't know, or we'll get together, or we haven't really discussed it. If you know how much money you have to spend,
Mhm.
and if I ask you what's your budget, and you don't have like even some people are like, well, I've never done this before. I get that, right?
Mhm.
And I'm like, I'll say, do you have 10K? And if they're like, well, what, then I'm like, maybe we're not the right fit, right? But
Mhm.
then there are people who I know have money. It's the funny thing is, it's the people who have money
Mhm.
that are so tight with it, right? And I have a saying, rich people didn't get rich by spending it,
Mhm.
but but
That's
it's
true.
those people that want to get so much out of you. It's that business owner who's just starting, who's like, look, I got 5K. And you're like,
Yeah.
I appreciate your honesty. Let's work with what you got,
Yeah.
versus the person that's like, well, I could, I'm good. This is going to be national and I can put you in front of this person. This is going to be a lot of no. So as soon as you start trying to give me value adds to this work instead of the dollar amount, that's a red
Yeah.
flag. Another red flag. So that one thing is just like trying to, get me to agree to something without any money. The
Right.
second red flag is a lot of doubt, right?
Mhm.
If you don't believe in me, I shouldn't have to convince you.
Mhm.
When you start asking me 100 questions of like, well, what happens if this, or what happens if that, or, how do I know, and all that, that's a huge red flag. Because at that point, you're looking for a way out. And if I
Mhm.
convince you to get in, then I'm only setting myself up for failure. At that point, you're looking
Right.
for one moment to be like, well, you said it was going to be here on Tuesday, and it's
Mhm.
not here on Tuesday. And so at that point, and I've had a couple of people like that who are first time business owners, first time having a
Mhm.
brick and mortar, and like a sign for them, a $10,000, $20,000 sign package for them is like everything. And like
Right.
we did some work for an endodontist.
Mhm.
And literally we did everything. We fabricated, it was beautiful, we installed it, and he calls me up and he's like, I think it's like just 2 millimeters lower on this side. 2 millimeters, man. Like, this is meant to be experienced from 10 to 12 feet away, and you're over here sweating me because you're looking at it this close. And I'm like, you might be in people's grills, right? And 2 millimeters means a lot to you, but I work at a distance. And
Distance.
so,
Yep.
like I also too, we work with other trades, right? So
Mhm.
you have a GC, you have somebody laying in tile, all of a sudden I have to put a sign on the wall, and we put the sign on the wall, and you're like, it's crooked. And I said, no, your ceiling's crooked. And a lot of people don't realize that their ceiling's not true. So I'll put
Mhm.
a level on it, and it's like, yeah, that's level, but your ceiling's not level. And so
Yeah.
optically, you're seeing it that way. And
Mhm.
so, a lot of things like that. So as soon as somebody starts having doubts from the before we even get into a contract, if they start
Yeah.
having doubts, I just, when in doubt, let it out. And so we just say, no, I don't think it's a good fit. You're obviously
Mhm.
not ready to make this move. Come back to me when you're prepared.
Mhm.
And so that's number two. The number three, I mean, those are usually the ones. I guess number three would be is somebody who does not have their shit organized on their end.
Mhm. Yep.
And we work with a lot of nonprofits, and there's no dig at nonprofits, but it is a lot of it is they get budget, they want to
Mhm.
spend it, they start signing contracts, moving things forward, but they don't have somebody dedicated to this actual
Mm.
project.
Yeah.
And it becomes where a project that was supposed to be done in 3 months ends up being 18 months. and you're like, I got to move on. And they're like, well,
Mhm.
and they get design fatigue is the problem too, is that, they'll sign off on something, after, the first 90 days, they love it. They're all enamored with it. They're like, okay, we
Yeah.
just got to get our budget together. A year later, they're like, so we'd like to make some changes. No, you've seen this for 18 months.
Yes.
The world has not seen it, right?
Right.
So you just got to trust me that this is going to be brand new and everything's going to be great. You're just having design fatigue from seeing it.
Mhm.
So usually when things start dragging on, it's because of a lack of organization on their end. And that's the as much as that red flag doesn't pop up until
Mhm.
later, you can sniff it out pretty early when it's like we also get the people, oh gosh, the people who kick off a project, get it all signed off on, and you're like, okay, we're ready to, move this forward. They're like, I'm leaving. And they're like, I'll put in my 2 weeks. I'm like, okay, great. So now I got to start all over with a
All
whole
over.
brand new
Oh my
person. And then that brand
goodness.
new guy comes in, this new CEO, and he's like, I got my own company I'm going to go with. And you're like, I've been working this deal for 6 months, trying to
Mm,
get this going through. And all of a sudden
mm.
somebody new comes in. So
Man,
yeah,
that is
those
not
are the
too
things I
bad.
deal with quite a bit. And because we work with so many different businesses, we work from
Mhm.
directly with business owners all the way up to agencies, to, I mean, government agencies to huge nonprofits. We work with so
Mhm.
many different types of people that, it's just you
Yeah.
kind of got to trust your instinct.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, that's crazy. But it's funny because it still applies even if you're freelancing, because those things still happen even at a freelance level. And it's the funniest. That's why I was laughing because I was like, yeah, I've encountered those. I've encountered that one too. So it's
There's
very
really no difference, man. Freelancing and owning owning a studio and
Mhm,
agency, there's no difference. The difference is that you have a team of people that
mhm.
are expecting to be paid every single,
Yeah,
every 2 weeks. They're expecting to get a paycheck in, and you hope to be able to have enough work on a regular basis. That's it. That's the only difference between
yeah.
freelancing. The difference is like I can go to Disney World like I did last week, and the
Mhm.
work is still being done by the team, right?
Yeah,
Where if I was freelancing, the moment I'm not working is when I stop making money.
yes. So I'm curious. I've heard you called your clients partners. How does that help shift the dynamic when they come to work with you? Do they feel like, okay, I have more of a say, or is it kind of like scare off a few of them?
It's funny you considered it as a possibility of them feeling like they have more of a say. I look at it quite the other way, right? I don't work for anybody. I work
Mhm.
with people. The
Got you.
moment somebody starts trying to act like I work for them is when I will fire a client in a heartbeat. And I know that sounds arrogant. I don't work for anybody. I didn't leave my salary and cush environment at Dell to be told what to do by somebody who's uneducated, who doesn't know what this is and thinks that they can do my job. So,
Mhm,
that sounds a little arrogant, but I don't have to put up with that. So the reason why we call them partners is it truly is a partnership, right?
mhm,
I need something from you, you need something from me. We have to work together. The moment you stop working with me,
mhm.
how can I be successful?
Yeah.
And so that is where the partnership, as soon as somebody is like, I want this, and I go, no, that's not going to work. And they go, well, I'm paying you. That's when it's like, well, then this is over. Like I will refund somebody's money in a heartbeat. I will shut down a project. We have clauses in our contracts that say we have a cancellation policy. We can cancel at any point in time for any reason we want. And it depends on how much time has gone by. We will refund or we won't refund. And
Mm,
it's really because I've freelanced enough to know that there are people like
100%.
that.
Yep.
And so when we come in, we are experts at what we do. And I know
Mhm,
that sounds a little bit arrogant, but we are specialists in this field of design where a lot of people design logos, a lot of people design things, and we do that also. But when it comes to signage and wayfinding,
mhm,
we are really, really, really good. And we understand that there are criterias and there are sign codes and there are everything that we have to be compliant with, ADA
mhm,
code and everything, that someone can't tell me that they want something if it's not going to be compliant. And so at
mhm.
that point, like and I learned this honestly from Dell, is
Mhm,
because we were the brand team. It was just 12 of us, and we answered only to the brand.
mhm.
That was it. No one, no executive,
Yeah.
no one, not even
So
Michael Dell himself, right,
yeah.
could tell us. No, it was never challenged, but could tell us to violate the brand that we had built for the
Mhm,
company, and our vision was the brand level. So having that kind of armor and being able to say like, "Hey, I'm doing this for the right reasons
Yeah.
and I can stand behind that, protects you. And so I use that same thing as like we have ADA sign code, we have local sign code, we have your landlord sign criteria, we have all these things that we have to fall under.
Mhm.
This is why we are delivering this to you. You might want something else, but let me tell you, it has to fit within these parameters. Also, budget. It's
Mhm.
really easy to tell people like your budget is X, right? So I got to work with that.
Yeah.
So that's usually, helps kind of minimize any of that. But the partnership really is when you tell people like you're my partner and
Mhm.
we're, you're the partner, and that's everybody. That's not just, our
Mhm.
clients. That's also our vendors, right? They're
Mhm.
partners because we have to work with them and they have to work with us. So they don't say, no, I'm not going to do that. We're
Mhm.
going to solve the problem together.
Yeah. I think that's a very interesting way to approach it. And I think you're hitting the nail right on the head by saying, "Hey, it's in our clause. We can do this. If you feel at any point you can do it yourself, we will gladly let you." I think that's the funniest thing. Funny. I mean, it's a probably more politically correct way of saying it in the clause, but it's kind of like if you feel like you can do it, go ahead, knock yourself out.
And it just, again, you have to kind of set some standards for
Mhm.
what you are going to do and what you aren't going to do. If
Yeah.
you don't have any sort of integrity in the
Mhm.
work that you do, then you're going to end up doing work that you regret. And then,
Yeah.
I tell
Big
my
time.
students, good work leads to more good work. Same thing
Mhm.
with bad work, same thing with free work, right?
Mhm.
And so if you're known to be the cheapest,
That's
you're going to keep getting
that's
cheap
true.
work.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's where setting a standard for yourself and just knowing like I'm not going to be bullied by a client,
Mhm.
I'm not going to be manipulated by money to doing work that I'm going to later regret, and set a standard for myself.
Yeah. Now I'm curious. It was one thing I had found out that you did, and I was just so like, this man has magical powers. How did you manage to get your clients to pay for their work up front? That
Oh man.
how do you educate your clients on the value of that investment? I know about deposits, but I'm seeing you're over here talking about, no, I need all that.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Like explain that process if you don't mind.
So I made this observation early on. So,
Mhm.
we do signage and wayfinding, which is tucked under construction,
Mhm.
unfortunately, right? So, just to give the audience a little bit of an understanding, say a hotel, right? A
Mhm.
hotel will get a say we're going to build this hotel. They have the architectural plans. They'll get a GC to
Yeah.
bid on it, right? And they'll say,
Mhm.
okay, we can build this whole hotel for 1.5 million, right? Or 3 million or 4 million, whatever it is. And then just arbitrarily, they say this is the signage budget,
Mhm.
right? Not knowing how many signs that you need, not knowing what the look of the brand is
Mhm.
or what the vibe is, not knowing anything about materiality. They just arbitrarily pick a budget.
Mhm.
And so at that point, they go out and this is how it was done. And it's still done to this day is they'll just go out to sign companies and they say, request for proposal. And they'll just send the deck over. They'll send you all the construction documents. They're like, give us a quote on what? Like on what, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know if you want wood. I don't know if you want leather. I don't know if you want solid gold or if you just
Right.
want acrylic, stuff that you can get off the shelf at Home Depot. Like what you don't even know, but you're supposed to just be able to arbitrarily tell them how much it's going to be. And then they're going to bid that against other people. And whoever has the lowest price is going to win. And that's how it is in the sign industry.
Yeah.
And I was like, nope, that's not going to work. And so my introduction to the sign industry actually is from my wife's side.
Mhm.
My wife's father owned a sign company and was had sold signs for a long time. Then he built a facility and ended up
Mhm.
becoming one of the largest in Texas. And then he sold it in
Wow.
2008. And so that was my introductions to like
Mhm.
signs.
Yeah.
And it was through him that I actually understood the sign industry and all the shit that was wrong with it.
Mhm.
And so at Dell, branding,
Mhm.
managing the global brand, a lot of what I had to manage was events and how the brand of Dell was represented externally at various things. And so I found myself realizing there was this weird connection or disconnect between a brand's brand identity and how it was represented in physical spaces. There was a disconnect. Sign companies, they don't employ designers. They employ production people who will take a logo and say, okay, it's this dimension or whatever, but no one's actually thinking about solving the problem for the user, which is your audience who's walking in that space or in that space. And so I realized, hey, this is something I can do. I can take all of my knowledge and my wife's knowledge of signage. I can take all of my knowledge of brand experience and design, and I can fuse them together and be this hybrid. And so, the crux was nobody was paying for design because no one was asking to pay for design. So long story short, I said to myself, we're going to get people to pay for design. And my wife's father was like, you're not going to be able to get anybody to do that. Like, no one does that. And I was like, well, then I'll be out of business real quick. That's it. And I told people, this is what your money is going towards. You are buying my time. We're allocating hours to solving your problem. We're not putting your logo on the wall. We are looking at that experience.
Yeah.
And when you talk to people intelligently about what you're trying to achieve, it's a surprising thing that they actually believe you. And so when you deliver and they're like, wow, like I would have never thought. And everything that we do is well packaged. Like the presentations are well presented. We're thoughtful. We provide everything to support our designs. People don't ever question, like, is this it? Right? Usually they're like, I never expected it, because we've raised the bar. We present what is typically looking like construction documents to other sign companies. We present which look like design decks. So when people have that experience, they have no problem, writing a check the next project after trusting us.
So do you show them what you did prior to get
Sometimes
them to
they
buy
ask.
in? Okay.
Sometimes they ask, can you show me some previous work? Some people have never done this, and we get that, right? Like if you've never owned a brick and mortar before, if you've never, this is your business is your baby, and you're trusting somebody that you've never met, with a good portion of your budget, and you're asking them to bring your brand to life in your physical space. I get any sort of mild hesitation, right? And just wanting a little bit of understanding. And so we'll sure, I'll show you what that deck looks like or what we presented, or they'll say how much, and they'll usually are brought in. So we don't do any paid advertising. We don't do anything of the sort like that. All we do is do earned media, podcast. I get paid to talk on stages about what we do. And we'll do some dog and pony shows, which is like if an agency is curious about us, we'll go there and we'll present what we do. But that's it. So we don't do everything that we do is word of mouth. So usually somebody came to us because someone said you should go to Studio Zoe. At that point, if they don't want to go with us, it's for whatever reason, we're not going to push it. But usually they're already warmed up to the idea. It's just when it comes down to money is usually when we find out how ready they are to move forward.
Yeah, that's interesting. That I wonder if many more companies might take that route. I don't know if that's kind of like scary for them.
Sharing work or
no, the whole just getting the client to pay up front.
I don't know why that's scary. Well, I mean, you don't go get a sandwich and not pay, right?
That's true. That is very true.
You wouldn't get a lawyer to work on something and not pay them up front, right? We are professionals. Like, absolutely, I should be compensated. You know how many people say, oh, I'm gonna pay you? If I had to chase down money, and when I freelanced, I had to chase down money in the worst ways, y'all. Like,
I believe it.
I'm talking about rolling up on somebody and be like, "You're gonna pay me now, or I'm gonna get this money." So I didn't want to do that, and I've had to do it. I've had to do it legally, right? I've had to get lawyers and involved and be like, "Hey, you signed a contract, bud. Like, we delivered the work. You said the check was in the mail. It's been 3 months now, and I can't get a hold of you. You're getting, getting a letter,
right?" Wow, that's crazy. People still doing that, huh? Trying to get over on you. Well,
I mean, it happens. It happens, and you just try to protect yourself as much as possible. That's why, like, if it's under $5,000, we have to get the whole thing up front. Like, because we move fast. We tell people, like, in order for us to move fast and hit goals, we can't, mess around with, let me put down 500 and I'll get you another 500 next week. No. And so it's like, if it's under $5,000, we need all of it up front so we can move quickly. Over that, then we can do a deposit of 50%.
Got it. Okay. That's good. That's good to know. So let's talk about the culture of your studio. So you have this get it done model versus the traditional 9 to 5. How has that improved the creative process for your team?
That's probably, I mean, I feel like you should probably ask them. It was more of a response to COVID, right? It was less
Yeah.
of an intentional model as it was where people now, because we were a 9 to 5, right? We were a
Yeah.
studio, we operated 9 to 5. It was like a standard environment. We wanted to
Yeah.
create a good work-life balance. We were like, finish at 5:30, go home, enjoy your life, come here at 9. Now all of a sudden we're inside. And
Hmm.
so are your kids, so is your wife, so is
Yeah.
everything else. And you're expecting, I can't expect you to, especially early pandemic, I can't expect you to magically be able to turn all that off and
Mhm.
focus during the hours of 9 to 5 in your home when it's chaos, right? And we're all still
Constant.
trying to figure out how we're going to live, period.
Yeah.
And so quickly we realized the work is going to get done. It just may not
Mhm.
happen in the hours that we had set aside because the kids got to eat, the cars got to get, serviced, you got to go to the dentist, whatever. And so we told our team, like, look, you're adults. We
Mhm.
pay you a salary. Get the work done.
Mhm.
If that means in the middle of the night, if that means early in the morning, if you got to take 2 hours because you got to take your kid to the doctor, if you got to go do this, like, that's fine. Put it on the calendar. Don't miss any client meetings.
Mhm.
Other than that, manager, we have 3 standing meetings in the morning at 9 o'clock. They can, people take it from their car, people take it from wherever they're at. Sometimes they
Mhm.
can't do it, and it's fine, right? As long as it's not production meeting, which is important.
Mhm.
But for the most part, we ask people to just be professionals. I don't need to have them sitting there moving their mouse to show me that they're on,
Yeah.
for 8 hours a day. No, just get the work done. And it's the results that matter, not how you go about doing.
Now, did this mindset come from having like a bad manager or a boss that changed your thinking process of like, okay, if I'm doing the work, I don't need someone hovering over me?
A little bit. I mean, when I
Mhm.
was at Dell, I had a great boss who was my creative director, Tommy Lynn, and I think it was like the very first week,
Mhm.
he was like, "Hey, man, I just want you to know, like, if you want to go to lunch with your daughter or whatever you need to do, like, don't worry about it. Just let me know. Like, you don't
Mhm.
have to feel like you are stuck here all the time." And like,
Mhm.
just the fact that he made that clear the first week I was there at this Fortune 50 company,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
was like completely overdressed, like I was dressed like I was at the front of the house, and he's like, "You don't got to be like that, right?" But like, he made it clear to me, like, he trusted me and treated me like a professional to do the
Mm.
work. And so he was like, "If you want to go and live, like, do things in your life, like, it's okay." And that really set the precedent that you don't have to be this, like,
Mhm.
you know overseer and be like,
Right.
you need to be here, right? And so that really gave, like, I took a lot from my experience at Dell, having a great leader
Mhm.
who was people first and work second.
Mhm.
And I took that and I was like, when I, have my own studio, I want to treat my people really, really well, because
Mm.
that's how we kind of liken ourselves to like a small good cult.
Mhm.
And
Good
so,
cult.
we want our team to love, and I know there's all this Instagram about,
Mhm.
wait, that toxic language of family, and don't,
Mhm.
if they say it's like a family, but no, truly, like, their kids, their parents, their husbands, their wives, like, we know them, right? Like,
Mhm.
we have, like, their kids design stuff and we put them on shirts, right? We do all
Yeah.
sorts of things. We go to their weddings, we go to their churches, and to christenings or whatever they're
Mhm.
doing. Like, we are involved in their personal lives, and they're
Mm.
involved in our personal life, because you know you spend more time with the people you work with than anybody else.
Right.
And so if you don't like them, you're not going to produce good work. If you don't
Mhm.
enjoy being around them and trust them, you're not going to produce good work. And so
Mhm.
I wanted to create an environment that really said, "Hey, I trust you. Do the good
Mm.
work." And I learned all that from having a great leader in Tommy Lynn at Dell.
Mm. So give us your I would say top 4 key points to being a great leader, because I feel like your team is loyal. I feel like they trust you, they let you steer the ship, but they also know, like, you'll ride for them. So what are some key points that, I don't know, your team would think you would, that makes you a good leader?
I would say the first thing is, like, being honest, right?
Mhm.
Being trustworthy, transparent.
Mhm.
We are transparent to a fault, right?
Mhm.
We own the business, but we tell our team the numbers. We
Mhm.
do all hands where we show them like, this is how much money we did and didn't make. This is how much profit we did and didn't make off
Mhm.
the project. These are some of the crux. These are some of the things, we are transparent because it's important for them to understand. I can't treat them like they're not intelligent enough to
Mhm.
understand that we're doing good or we're not doing good, right?
Mhm.
So we're very transparent. I feel like I'm just always trying to be real.
Mhm.
I think maybe my approach is more casual than a lot of people,
Mhm.
would expect, but it's just like we're just people, right? So just tell me what's going on. Like I
Mhm.
tell people, like I tell my students too, ABC, always be communicating. And so tell me what's going on. If I don't know you're sick
Mhm.
and you're not doing a good job or you're not there,
Mhm.
then I'm gonna assume the worst,
Right.
right? But if you tell me, "Hey, Russ, I'm sick," or "I'm not feeling well, I got this shit going on," or "I'm going through a
Yeah.
divorce," or like, I'm not sleeping well at night," or
Mhm.
whatever, like, tell me what's going on, like, keep it real with me,
Right.
because I can then, make some accommodations, I can understand, but as soon as you start hiding things from me, I'm gonna start thinking the worst, and so
Right.
I ask them to be communicative, but at the same time, I have to be forthcoming too, you
Mhm.
know? So I think, just being transparent, not trying to be like, I'm the captain of the ship and no one needs
Right.
to know when we're off
Right.
course. Just say, hey man, like shit, we're lost, but we're together, we're gonna get there, right?
We're lost, but we gonna figure it out together.
Exactly,
It's enough
exactly.
heads in here, we can find where we're going.
I think it's the stoicism that people try to act like leaders need to be in. It's like, don't
Mhm.
tell them when, things are wrong and all that. And it's like, no, man, when you start having secrets, that's when people start making up rumors. That's when some
Yeah.
people, start, talking and things start happening and people start leaving and you're like, what's going
Mhm.
on? They're like, man, well, I thought we were closing. And it's like, nah, man, I was just, this was
Mhm.
it. But if you have to be transparent, you have to create an environment, an open door policy, so
Yeah.
to speak. Also too is we are a small team,
Mhm.
but we operate like a Fortune 50 company. And I say that is we do annual reviews. We do 360 reviews. So every
Oh,
year,
wow.
every team member has to write their own self-assessment. And then every team member also
That's smart.
provides feedback and they talk about your wins and areas of opportunity. And we take all of that and we write a whole narrative and we share tidbits of everybody's
Mhm.
feedback. And then people feel like they're actually at a huge company and are getting feedback and are improving and they're not sitting there going, I'm in a dead end mom and pop shop.
Right.
And so we advance people on
Mhm.
their merit and their success and their talent, not on, well, you're at this role and then we can't put you at this other role
Mhm.
because there's somebody else already there. Like, no, well, if we have 15 art directors, we have 15 art directors, right? But that's
Yeah.
it. But the reality is that we
It's
treat
cool.
them like we create an environment that
Mhm.
feels like what you would get at a big company that has an
Mhm.
HR team that has all that. And it's just me and my wife Elizabeth who are running it.
Mhm.
So really giving people like this experience of feeling like they're
Yeah.
learning. We
Yeah.
invest in our team too.
Mhm.
Good leadership invests in your team, and so taking them, encouraging them to go to conferences, paying for them to
Mhm.
go to conferences, giving them time off for education, paying for education.
That's dope.
Those are things that when you invest in your people will invest in you. If you
Mhm.
treat them like they're just numbers and it's like, here's your paycheck and that's it. But it's
Mhm.
like we provide health insurance. And a lot of people are like, how can a small team of 7 people provide health insurance, for them? Well, that's my wife. My wife, man, she figures that shit out. She has agents and she figures all that out.
Yeah.
And she is digging in every year, reviewing
Mhm.
policies and figuring out the best ones for our team that are most affordable and all that, because you
That's
can't expect
cool,
people
man.
to work if they can't afford to get sick, right?
Right.
You can't
Right.
you can't expect that. And like in this nation right now, health care is not as accessible as it should be. And
Mhm.
so, I can't honestly say I'm doing good work with good people if I can't provide them health insurance, if I
Man.
can't provide them vision, if I can provide them dental or life insurance.
Mhm.
So it's things like that. First thing we did outside of, we've always given insurance. first thing we did at the pandemic, because I was dealing with anxiety and panic attacks, is we bought everybody, and still to this day, we still have it, an annual subscription to Headspace, because I truly believe in the value of meditation.
I use
And
it.
so we tell, we everybody on our team has a membership to Headspace, and a lot of them don't use it. So be it. But then, me and another art director, we were at a conference and we just started talking about it, and they gamify it, right? Like they
Mhm.
tell you like how many hours you've meditated. And like, here we are, like, competing. I was like, man, I got 191 hours of meditation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's good to see that they realize that we value their well-being,
Mhm.
their mental space,
That's
their
amazing.
health. And I think those are the things that, if you're leading a team and you have
Mhm.
people who are working for you, you have to find a way to provide them access to
Mhm.
a life that you would want,
Yeah.
and insurance and the comforts that are you deserve.
Yeah. Man, my hat's off to you for that because there's not many companies, large or even small, trying to make those I wouldn't say sacrifices, but trying to keep those their members that happy. Because I feel like
Yeah,
that's how you build a loyal culture and community at work is like treating them like they're a human being rather than a number.
absolutely, absolutely. I think I've seen agencies who
Yeah.
are probably more profitable than us, who are, give people $100 a month for a health insurance stipend. I ain't gonna do it, and
We're
it's
supposed to
like,
do go to the gym.
yeah, and it's and it's just silly to think that you expect people to be able to come into your studio every day and
Mhm.
not have health insurance and not afford to get sick.
Man.
And it's just that, that's one of those things that I've seen from people
Mhm.
that I respect, and at the same time I've lost a little bit of respect. But I'm like, you don't offer your team that, and they're like, I can't afford. No, you can. You don't want to. It's just too much of a hit. And I
Yeah.
know, because I see how much we pay out every month for people's health insurance, but it's important.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, man. Wow. So let's speak about culturally. How is it being a black designer, like just in Austin, Texas, in the South? Because not many designers are coming out of the South that we hear about. But you are making like so you're putting your staking your flag in the ground and you're waving it proudly. So how is it being a black designer shape the kind of work you do and create for others?
Well, as you can probably tell, I'm racially ambiguous, right? So
Yeah.
a lot of times people will look at me, and growing up in Texas, there's only three races, right? There's black, white, and Mexican. And so when you're a kid in the '80s, right, like people would just immediately make assumptions about your
Mhm.
race, right? And having a black father and who looked like Emmett Smith, and a white mother who looked like Martha Stewart, right? And you come out and you got these peanut butter babies with like curly-ish wavy hair, and
Yeah.
everybody's like, you're Mexican, right? And I'm like, no. And so I've always been racially ambiguous.
Mhm.
Black people magically can sniff it out. They're like, ooh, he's black. But for the most part, I've been able to navigate spaces kind of under the radar,
Mhm.
incognito, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so that has been really difficult as a child, right? And even as an adult, when you're in primarily white spaces and people will say things assuming that they're not offending you, or that you are going to align with them.
Mhm.
And I wish that I could say that that was only in the '80s or the
Mhm.
'90s or when I was a child, but there was times even at Dell where I had to be in rooms with people who said things, and then I would raise a stink, and then they would be like, "Why is Russell so upset?" And they're like, "Because he's black." And so, and why does that even matter, right? And so,
Oh my
it
god.
is weird. It is very, very weird. And
Mhm.
so, I've been fortunate to navigate spaces
Mhm.
under the radar, but at the same time, I think anybody who's biracial has always felt not enough in
Mhm.
either category. I'm not black enough, and I'm not white enough to live in these spaces, to fully exist in these spaces
Yeah.
comfortably. So, I know that there are people who, see me and say, "Well, you say you're a black designer, but you don't visually align with that. So people haven't treated you the same way."
Oh
But at the
wow.
same time, I've had to face those microaggressions, and some of those less than micro overt aggressions. And so I've made it a point, on our website, you will see Black owned and
Mhm.
women led. And I made it a point because I believe that people need to know who's behind the vision, the mission,
Mhm.
and the purpose.
Mhm.
And also it's also to weed out some of the other folks who may not necessarily want that.
Yeah.
So if you don't like that I overtly say we're Black owned and women led, then I don't want to work for you anyway, right?
Mhm.
And you're not a partner I want to work with if that's something that bothers you. But
Mhm.
the amount of work that we have gotten from people who said, because I read that, I want to work with you,
Wow.
has been so. No one's ever said I didn't want to work with you because of that.
Mhm.
I've faced microaggressions from property owners who didn't believe that we were qualified, because of XYZ and things like that. But never have I had someone said I was gonna work with you until I found out you were Black.
Mhm.
But I've had a lot of people work with us simply because we are Black owned and women
Mm.
led. So, yeah, I feel like you got to put that flag in the
Mhm.
sand and tell people, like, or draw that line and say, hey, this is something that I stand on.
Mhm.
And if you have a problem with it, cool.
Yeah.
Keep it moving.
So, why is it important to you, do you think? Why is it important for Black designers to have spaces to connect and grow?
It's essential, especially now, especially now with history being rewritten and erased. It is essential for the story of Black Americans
Mhm.
and the narrative that we are writing at this
Mhm.
moment to be documented, whether it be in our work, a lot like the work that Cheryl Miller is doing, whether it be in, curating, or
Mhm.
whether it be the voice or connecting with that audience. Black people have always had their finger on the pulse of America and culture
Mhm.
and have led everything. And so to design has always, unfortunately, been an other thing.
Mhm.
It's been a thing where very elitist, access to agencies, access to education,
Mhm.
access to information, access to spaces. And I truly believe it was 2020 when it became super, super clear that Black people were never waiting to be
Mhm.
given access to these spaces.
Yeah.
Black people were not saying, "Give me a seat at the table." Black people were like, "We have our own table. We've been had our own
No
table.
table.
We're not worried
Just let
about
us
your
pull up
table."
next to you, man. That's it.
The But even that, there's so much money, right? There's so
Yeah.
much money that people are that don't pay attention. There's so many Black dollars. There's so
Mhm.
many talented Black people that as soon as they can make money for someone, they are all of a sudden given access to these spaces that they weren't given access to before. And so I believe
Yeah.
in 2020, that's when the AIGA 3% thing came out, the design census came out, and that's when everybody's like, oh, we need to have all these DEI efforts and all that. And a lot of people came to me and they were like, Russell, help us create a program
Mhm.
to hire or give a
Mhm.
platform for Black designers. And I said no. I said
Mhm.
no, because I'm like, show me a 5-year sustainability plan. Show
Mhm.
me how you're going to continue to invest in Black people and Black designers and young Black creatives for 5 years. Show me that.
Mhm.
But I'm not doing this little summer camp thing where you're going to have them shadowing somebody and think that that's actually going to do something. And because I truly believe that, you know, Black people have been doing this and doing what we've been doing for so long that
Mhm.
we've supported and nurtured each other, that we're not looking for handouts in any way. We'll
Mhm.
take the money. Don't get me wrong. I'll tell people all through 2020 and 20, take the money, right? Get the grants, take the whatever you want to get it while you
Mhm.
can, while they're giving it out. But we've never been waiting around to be, given access to spaces. We've created our own spaces, our own music, our own style, our own design,
Mhm.
and we will continue. So it is very important for Black people to have those spaces, but we've been creating those spaces for ourselves. I think in places like Austin, unfortunately, the
Mhm.
Black community is dwindling
Mm.
at a crazy rate, and so it is important for us to find
Mhm.
each other, whether that be online or in
Mhm.
person. It is important because culture, voice, style, all that is something that we feed off of each other. And when
Mhm.
you feel like you can't be your authentic self because you're not in a space with people that look like you or have
Yeah.
similar cultural backgrounds as you start to kind of lose that identity. And I think it's
Mhm.
important. One of the best things that I went to was the Hue Design Summit. I don't know if you
Mhm.
heard of that, back in 2021,
I
I
haven't.
believe. And it only ran for a couple of years, and then the people who organized it, they got busy. Life happens.
Mhm.
But it was Hue HUE Design Summit, and it was all Black designers, and it was in Atlanta. And it was one of the best experiences I ever went to. Just to be around so many super educated Black people and designers, and just
Mhm.
I felt like a tiny, tiny fish in this pond full of big, big hitters, and it was an amazing experience.
That that's I wish I could go see something like that. I would love to see
Oh,
something like that, man. That
it was
sounds
great,
amazing.
and I made some lifelong friends in that weekend
Mhm.
just from being in that space. It was like a 3-day or 2-day conference,
Mhm.
that you actually, like, stayed in Atlanta, and then you came to this house, and all the speakers came to this house. It was very much like a house. We were in the kitchen eating together. It was very
Wow.
just culturally
Yeah.
accurate, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
so it was such a great experience. And I would love for something like that to continue to happen,
Mhm.
because it was one of those moments where I met people that I wouldn't normally meet because we were from all over the
Mhm.
nation, but became good friends with them through that.
So that's interesting, that you brought up, like, being Black and how we create our own spaces. Now, this is me coming at it from a teacher perspective. Are you seeing those students in your classroom, the Black and brown kids in your class? And is that helping kind of push that conversation like, "Hey, here's a space, Black teacher here, trying to give this space for you guys to help and grow and resources." Are you seeing that?
Unfortunately, the my students are representative of Austin.
Mm,
So the
I
7
yeah.
6% of Black
Mhm,
people in Austin is represented. So in a class of 12, I might have one if I'm lucky. Right. There's
yeah.
been some semesters where I've had three, and I'm like, oh wow, know. Um, and so unfortunately, yeah, the students that I'm seeing are representative of the lack of diversity here in Austin.
Mm,
um, I come at it, and maybe this is just me being too free, being too authentic. I come at it where I share my point of view with all of my students,
mhm,
whether they're Black, brown, white. I share my point of view. If it
mhm.
makes certain people uncomfortable, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
right? It makes you uncomfortable. That's a thing you need to work through. But
Mhm,
I share them. I encourage them to challenge the status quo. I encourage them to
mhm,
do projects on that solve real problems, not
mhm.
a
Yep.
fictitious brand. But how about you tackle something that's real? How about
Mhm,
if you have an issue, let's talk about how to solve that issue.
mhm.
And I provide a space for people to explore uh,
That's good.
design in ways that maybe were less than superficial than like
Mhm,
some of the projects they had, and talk about real issues. Like, if you have a problem with the police, like, let's make a poster series and talk about it.
mhm,
Right, let's talk about how we really feel about the police or whatever. If you have
mhm,
a problem with the politics, let's create a project around that, because
mhm,
if that's the work you want to do, let's do it.
mhm,
um, but yeah, I've never tried to tailor my class. I teach portfolio design, so I'm
mhm,
helping my students. I tell them, I can't teach you how to be a designer. You should have figured that out. I'm gonna teach you how to
mhm.
be a professional.
Yeah.
And so I never curate my approach to my class.
Mhm.
I try to level with them just like I level with my team.
Yeah.
And I tell them, like, this is what it's like out there in the world. And if you
Mhm.
are a woman, if you are Black, if you are brown, there are going to be things that you're going to have to overcome, unfortunately.
Right.
And this, a lot of times my students will ask me, like, should I put a picture on my portfolio of who I am? And I said, yeah, if it's important to you. Well, what if
Mhm.
they judge me, or what if they don't hire me because of this? And I said, do you want to work for somebody that would?
Just like that. Yep.
And usually that's when they're like, ah. And I'm like, I'm not going to tell you to
Mhm.
sit here and do what you need to do to get a job. I want you to
Yeah.
get a job that's going to help you grow.
Yeah. Now, just curious, why do you think there's not a lot of us in design or in the creative space of art and
Access.
design? Mm,
And I say this is that design, first off, access both to role models and
mhm,
access to education and access to software and hardware.
mhm,
So those kind of three things is, unfortunately, I went. So I tell the story, but I
mhm,
went to a Creative Mornings and they had an astronaut, and he was talking about being an astronaut.
mhm.
And he said, when I was a kid, everybody on my street, their dad was an astronaut. My dad was an astronaut.
Mm,
Everybody's father was an astronaut. So we all knew we were going to be astronauts.
astronaut,
And I
yeah.
just thought, holy shit, like, hold on. People accept that, right? We
Mhm,
accept that, well, this kid is going to be an astronaut like his
yeah,
dad. No one would sit there and go, you could have been so much more. Why would you be an astronaut? Right. But you'll tell a kid who grows up around nothing but drug dealers or grows up with, service work or whatever. And like, you could have dreamed bigger. Right. But we tend to identify ourselves with the people that we see on a regular basis.
right.
And so if we don't see designers, if we
Mhm,
don't see people making a living and a career with creative jobs like
mhm,
design or UX design or art or anything like that, if we don't see people having fruitful lives, we'll never be able to be like, I want to do that,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And also we see a lot of parents tell their kids, you shouldn't get into this because you're not going to make a living.
mm,
And so right there, that's the first barrier. Is just the fact that we don't see people like us
mhm,
making money, paying their bills, having an enjoyable life, right? And
mhm,
doing it off of design. The next thing would be is access to education, right? A
mhm,
lot, ACC is an amazing program. That's an affordable, work focused program that teaches design to students in a 2.5 year degree program where they're able
that's
to walk
good,
out and get fully employed.
that's good.
Um, and that's what community colleges do. Not every community college has great adjuncts. Not every community college has great
Mhm,
instructors that are going to help students have
mhm,
a successful career in design. So wherever they're located at might limit them to access to education. I
mm.
mean, then also the affordability of higher ed and other schools, and then
Mhm,
also the hardware. I mean,
yeah,
shit, to get started, the barrier of entry to get into design. I mean, you're dropping 2K on a laptop. I mean, what is Adobe now a month, 60 a month or something like
yeah,
that?
it's gone up,
So you're
yeah,
asking somebody to make $1,000 almost, investment in a year in software,
yeah,
and
that
then on, and
and
then
tech and with computer, keyboard, mouse, if you get an iPad,
monitor
that
everything.
yeah, oh my
And then
goodness.
it's like, now figure it out. And on top of that, there's things like Canva and other people who are doing
Yeah,
everything they can to dwindle our expertise. And so, yeah, when someone sits there and says all these barrier of entries, plus we're not going to give you education that you can afford, and plus you've never seen anybody actually, succeed in
mhm,
this, that's why we're not seeing. So unfortunately, the
yeah,
people that are occupying the spaces are the ones who have freedom to fail, right?
mhm,
Is And that's where I tell people, like, the luxury of failure is something that a lot of black and brown people can't afford.
mhm,
And so we don't get the chance to explore and figure out what we do and don't want to do. We have to start getting to this money as quickly as possible.
yeah,
And so I think that is, at least for me, that was a
mhm,
barrier of entry. I can't speak for everybody, but for me it was, I didn't have a choice. I had to make it work because I had to take care of my daughter at home. So I had to figure out a way of making money. It
mhm,
just so happened that I just, figured out the secret and it
mhm,
and made it work for me.
yeah. So what is, I don't know, the biggest lesson your students have taught you?
Man, the biggest lesson I've learned from my students is that I don't know anything. Right? They
Yeah,
I
heard
As
that
soon as
one.
I think I know something, right?
They
They
flip
ask
it.
the most stupidest question. And I say this is, it sounds
Absolutely, I've
stupid
heard
right
I know
away.
where it's going, I know where
And
it's
then you're
going.
like, hold on, I don't know. And then you're like, I got to look into that. And it's
Yeah,
because we're so ingrained in what we do because we've been doing it that sometimes we don't know why.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
they do something in such a way because of just being naive or ignorant. They do something in a way that we would never expect. And we're like, well, look at that. Right. So I tell them I can learn more from them than they'll ever learn from me, because they're still in
Mm.
that learning brain, right? They're still
Yeah.
inquisitive. They're still trying to figure it out. That sometimes they do something that on the surface seems so dumb, and then
Yeah.
you're like, "Whoa, that's actually really, really cool. I just never seen that approach, or I would have never asked that question,
Yeah.
or I never considered that." And so I appreciate that from them, is that
Yeah.
the more I surround myself with the people who don't know, the
Yeah.
more I realize how much I don't know.
Yeah. That's funny. I think as a teacher, we've all been there where it's just like, let me think about that. I'll come back to you. Yeah, definitely.
So my daughter's deaf,
Mhm.
and so there's a difference when you're raising a deaf child versus a hearing child. What
Mhm.
first thing I realize is that uh, hearing children learn passively, right?
Mm.
It's why you'll have a kid repeating things that you might have said, or repeating words they hear
Mhm.
on a radio or in music or whatever, and you're like, "Where'd you learn that?" Right?
Mhm.
Everything a deaf child learns is active, right? They have to
Mhm.
be taught that word, that sign, the
Mhm.
context of that. They have to be taught that. So you have to be intentional about what you are exposing your child to and teaching
Mhm.
your child and what's being taught to your child, because there's not a lot of passive learning, it's a lot of active learning. And so
Right.
that really forced me to kind of think about everything that I do is like being intentional about it, and putting purpose behind my work, putting
Mhm.
purpose behind how I communicate and things like that. Because, I think that sometimes we just passively absorb. This is how we've always done it, but no one's ever
Yeah.
said why. So when you have a deaf kid saying, "What's the sign for this?" Right. And you're like, "I don't know." Right.
Yeah.
And then now I'm asking my daughter, "What's the sign for this?" And sometimes she says, "I don't know. We just finger spell it." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"There's got to be a sign for this," you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. Now, has your daughter taken any liking to the business, the family business as
No, unfortunately,
Ah.
she does not consider herself a creative, and that breaks my heart.
Mhm.
But no, she has zero interest. She worked with us over one summer during the pandemic, and that didn't work out too well because no one wants to take orders from their parents.
Right.
And especially being an adult child, you don't want to take orders from your parents, and so
Right.
she was not down for that. And she was doing little side projects, but
Mhm.
essentially no, she has no interest in working for us as a creative. But she has over the years become more
Mhm.
receptive to our recommendations on her career path.
Mhm.
And so she's, no one wants to have their parents tell them what to do, especially when they have the freedom to choose. But
Right.
she's starting to realize now, like, oh, okay, my dad actually knows some stuff. Okay, so.
That's incredible. So as we're looking forward to the future for you, where do you see Studio Zoe 5 years from now?
Man, I used to have 1, 3, and 5-year goals, right? Just so that
Mhm.
way I'm kind of always driving towards something.
Mhm.
But with the current atmosphere and climate of politics in our nation, I honestly cannot confidently put like goals out there because we
Mhm.
have to be nimble, right? It's kind
Right.
of like saying, where do you see yourself in 5 years, a year before the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
It's like this is yet, in my opinion, another pandemic of a
Mhm.
different sort. And so we have
I
to
can
be
see that.
nimble. We have to be responsive. And to say that I have any sort of foreshadowing or any sort of goals would be naive for me not to consider what we're
Mhm.
facing right now. So right now we're committed to doing good work with good people. But at the same time, we are looking at how things are being affected, how changes
Mhm.
are happening. And so we are going to respond to those as we can. And that
Mhm.
may be, pivoting like we had to do in 2020 and so on. It may be changing our focus altogether.
Mhm.
It may be more international. Who knows?
Yeah. Okay. Now, how do you define success now compared to when you first started?
Man. So I think money obviously has always been a motivator
Mhm.
for a lot of people who grew up without. And so I've always been very money motivated. And
Mhm.
then as I have created more of a financial balance in my life
Uh-huh.
over the last maybe 10 years, I realize money only solves some of the problems.
Mhm.
And so for me, success is being able to continue to live the life that I live now, which is where I have the freedom to choose the work that I do,
Yeah.
to choose the people I work with, and be able to choose, how I spend my time.
Mhm.
And because of how we're a fully remote model, I'm able to work from anywhere. And
Mm.
so a lot of times me and my wife will travel to another city, another state, and for the last couple of years, other countries. We've done 6 weeks, 7 weeks in Portugal, in France, and we enjoy that.
Mhm.
We did 4 weeks in China and Japan just recently.
Mm.
And while we still work from there,
Mhm.
we're able to work from wherever, and we have an amazing team that allows us to take care of the things local that need to be taken care of locally, hands on, and then support us if there's a 16-hour or 13-hour
Mhm.
time difference, right? Being able to help us during the times that we're not available because of
Mhm.
the sleep.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's what success is for me. So being able to work how I want to work in the way I
Mhm.
want to work, and not you know create a 9 to 5 model that I'm now you know uh reliant or demanded to adhere to.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think that's what success looks like for me. I mean, obviously a little bit of money, a little bit more money would be fine, but it wouldn't solve any problems. If that forced me to be chained to my desk,
Mm.
then that wouldn't be the life I'd want.
Man, how do you see travel in helping in your design? Being someplace else, s not in the same city, how has that helped with creativity and design for you?
That is the only way you can become a better designer, is to
Mm.
surround yourself with new solutions. I
Mhm.
tell my students that. I said, the thing is that if you're a 21-year-old, 25-year-old student, right, you are only going to be so good because you've only existed on this planet for so long, and you've only seen so many solutions where, sure, somebody who's 10 years older than you may not be able to have the design chops, but they've
Mhm.
got life experience that you just can't fast track. And
Right.
so the only thing you can do is open your eyes a little bit wider, put
Mhm.
yourself in new environments. Travel for me is something I never had access to as a child.
Mhm.
And so now that is like all I do. I wish that there was a month that I could go by that not I wasn't on a plane,
Mhm.
somewhere. But it's something that I really, really enjoy, because changing my environment it changes my thinking, changes
Mm.
how
Mhm.
it's the same thing as like when, burnout, right? When you're sitting at your
Yeah.
desk and you're just burning out, and we all know, right? Get away from the computer, go take a walk.
Yeah.
Taking that walk just changes your atmosphere.
Yep.
Taking a walk in a new city, taking a walk in a new country changes how you think. I don't care if you're getting on a cruise boat, right? There's not a moment of my day that I'm not in a place where I don't go, how did they do that? Why did
Mhm.
they do that?
Right.
How did they achieve that?
Yeah.
I'm constantly that inquisitive person. So
Mhm.
changing my surroundings on a regular basis helps me just stay. And I am constantly, you can ask my team, I'm sending pictures to the team all the time. And I'm like, look at this, guys, look at this guy. Boom, 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 boom.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter what it is. It can be a
That's
thing
cool.
on the wall, something on the
Yeah.
ground, whatever. And I'm constantly referencing. I don't have a photographic memory, but it's pretty close to it.
Mhm.
Um, and I can just pull some obscure thing out of my head. I'm like, I have a picture of that and from like 7 years ago that I took on the side of the road. And
Mhm.
it's just, that is how I
That's cool.
do everything that I do, right? Is
Mhm.
we ideate by experiences. And I just find travel to be the best education you can give yourself continuing on, is to
Yeah.
expose yourself to new environments.
That's amazing. I second that. I totally second that. Me and my wife just got back from Egypt. Loved it.
Man,
Loved it. Highly recommend go see it. As a designer, seeing the pyramids up close will kind of make you just in awe of
where
it.
else, so you just went to Egypt, or did you how long were you there, and
We were there
where
for
else
a
did you go?
week.
Okay, man,
We were for
that's a
we
plane
did it
trip for a week, man.
16 hours.
Man,
Buckle up.
that's one thing I travel very differently to people because I know I'm very fortunate. Like, I won't get on a plane unless I'm at a place for 5 days, right? And if I'm going international, I'm there for 4 weeks plus. Like,
Oh, wow.
that's just my
Man.
rule. Like, I'm not getting on a plane for 16 hours to go and spend 5 days. That's just me, and I'm very fortunate to be in that situation.
Yeah.
But we were just talking about that. We just came back from Disney World yesterday. We got back
Uh-huh.
yesterday. And I can tell you all day long why we go to Disney so much. But we were just talking about we need to go. So we're going to be going to Italy. And I'm like, we can just drive to Morocco.
Yeah.
Right. We can literally just drive to Morocco. And if we're already in Morocco, where else can we go? Like, that's how we think. We're those people that literally will be
Yeah.
in our hotel checking out and just be like,
Where's
you want to
next?
stay another week? You want to stay
Yeah.
another week? Or they're just asking if we could just stay another week,
Man,
right?
that's amazing, man. I can't wait to get to that status. When I get to that status, I will hit you up and be like, "Hey, so I'm here now. I'm gonna be here a couple of weeks. Come join me."
Oh man, but honestly, like that's the success I'm talking about. Is that
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate, and I would not be able to do this if I didn't have a supportive team that
Mhm.
allows us to. If we had to be in the studio, if we had to
Mhm.
be in a brick and mortar to manage a bunch of kids, then we
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to. But we have amazing
Yeah.
professional adults that work for us that we can trust that are
Yeah.
going to get the job done while we're away.
Yeah. So Russell, like, 2 more questions. I'm gonna respect your time. This conversation has been so good. But if your younger self could see you today, what words of advice would you give yourself?
Man, like how young are we talking about? We're talking about like 5 years ago, or like 14-year-old
Okay,
Russell.
let's talk in the beginning of adolescence. No, not adolescence. Let's take it to 21.
Okay.
21-year-old Russell. And you know
Man,
where you were at that stage. What would you what would you tell 21-year-old Russell?
it's gonna be okay, right?
Mm.
Like,
Mhm.
so I didn't have a smooth start to life,
Mhm.
to say it easily, right?
Yeah.
I had tore my ass on the highway of life by the time I was 21 years old, right? I had
Mhm.
gotten married, I had a child that was born with several anomalies, needed round the clock medical care. I was in a real bad way at the time of 21, and I
Mhm.
didn't know where I was going to go. I was contemplating some really, really bad life decisions.
Mhm.
And I am so thankful that I have the ability to learn from other people and their
Mhm.
mistakes.
Mhm.
Um, I would say to myself, like, believe in yourself, right?
Mm.
It's so easy. Self doubt. We're the
Mhm.
first to tell ourselves no. We
Mhm.
are the first to run the narrative of what's not going to happen, how we're going to be denied an opportunity, how someone is going to respond. We are the first to tell ourselves no. And so something
Yeah.
I tell everybody is don't be the first to tell yourself no, right? There's a line of people waiting to do that. Why are you the first? And so
Dang.
just
Yep.
do it. Shoot your
Mhm.
shot. Go out there and do it. The difference between you and somebody else is you are actually willing to try and
Mhm.
willing to accept failure.
Yep.
That is it, right? And so as soon as you get comfortable with failing,
Mhm.
man, you can do anything.
Yep.
You can
I
do
agree.
anything. It's failure, the fear of failure that prevents a lot of us from doing anything. So the first thing
Mhm.
I would tell myself is, hey, little Russ, like, you're good, man. You're good. Just believe in yourself
Mhm.
and it will be all right. It'll be all right.
Yeah, man, that is true. We do doubt ourselves, so we are the first ones to doubt ourselves.
Yeah.
Before the idea even gets to paper, we're like, "No, I don't know." And it's like, "No, take
And
that leap of faith."
if you surround yourself with people who are gonna question you and
Mhm.
ask you, like, "How are you gonna do it? What happens if you fail?" Like, get those people out of your corner, right?
Mhm.
Because they have never believed in themselves, and
Mhm.
they can't see things that are possible that they've never seen before, right? And
Yes.
so, I think that is the hardest thing. That I spent a lot of my class, the
Mhm.
16 weeks. I tell them, like, I you have an amazing portfolio. You being amazing designers
Mhm.
is not even half the battle. It's this.
Mhm.
You will, if you can't stomach the possibility of failing, if you can't gain the confidence to go in and shoot your shot for a job that maybe you're not qualified for, you're never going to advance. I've had
Mhm.
students who are very talented never pursue a career in design because they're so scared of failing,
Mhm.
or that they don't believe that they are talented enough. And I'm like, I'm telling you, you're talented enough. You just got to go out there and do it. And they're not being denied by anybody yet, because they won't even give themselves a chance to be denied.
Wow. Well, man, Russell, what can I say, man? This has been such a powerful conversation. Before we wrap, where can the people find you? Where can the people check out your work? All the good stuff.
Well, you can find me. I mean, I'm all over Austin. Unfortunately, I feel like I don't get a chance to take a break. So you can go to studiozo.com. That's studio D as in dog, Z as in zebra, O as in Oscar.com. You can follow us on social media, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. You can find Studio Zo. If you're here in Austin, I'm the president of AIGA Austin. So if you didn't know that, there you go. But we do lots of events. We do lots of professional development. As the president, my goal in my term is to raise the bar on professional development. I believe that it is important as an organization that we provide programming that actually serves the community, not just as a drinking event or social hour. So yeah, come to AIGA Austin. You can find me on the internet, Russell Toynes, Toynes. There's no other Toyneses out there other than my family, so you won't get us mixed up. But yeah, that's where you can find me on the internets.
All right. Well, thank you guys for listening. My name is Justin Robinson, the talented, dropping gems on us, the guy everybody needs to know, Russell Toynes, and this is the Art School Graduate Podcast. We'll catch you guys later. Peace.
Thank you very much, Justin.